what's wrong. Rewrote the song. Thoughts become action. Tell me what's happening. What's your mind wrapped in, wrapped around?
Within this course in order to create HTML code. So the good thing about HTML code is that it actually just runs in your browser. So HTML, CSS, which is used for styling of web pages, and JavaScript, which is used for create dynamic interaction for web pages, all of this gets rendered out and run through your browser. So you don't need any special tools in order to create and practice HTML. So that's really the good news. And as a matter of fact, as long as you've got a Chrome browser, you can actually create and update your HTML code directly within your browser. So the first thing that we need to do is actually create an HTML file, and we're going to start out by creating index.html, and this is going to be essentially our default file that the browser is going to know to go to and render out a content within our web page. So we're going to be showing you how to create your own index page within the next lesson. So to finish off about the different tools that there are out there, so there's a lot of different free editors. You probably already have something on your computer right now that you can use in order to render out and create HTML code. If you're looking for a good text editor, which is open source, provided by Adobe, so no cost to it, and it's a really good editor when you're starting out, and you can create a lot of really cool things with this editor. So as you can see here, you can write some HTML. You can also update your CSS right within line and a whole lot more. So this is available at Brackets.io, and I am going to be using Brackets.io, my Brackets application within this course as well. And another really good resource that I'm going to be using is CodePen.io, and the really cool thing about CodePen is that it allows me to write HTML code, and I can actually see it rendered out right within the page below or within the display area. And as mentioned before, CSS and JavaScript are also available within CodePen, and whatever we're typing within our CSS. So after you look at HTML and you understand the basics of HTML, you can progress to CSS and add in some styling, and then of course JavaScript for some dynamic interaction. And as you can see here, we're focusing on HTML within this course, so I've got some basic HTML in there. I can also change the views here, so if I want to have a side view here in the display area here on the right hand side, I can do that as well. You can also minimize the CSS and JavaScript and really focus just on that HTML. So and as you see, whatever you write out here on the left hand side, then you see being displayed here within the right hand side. So any changes or any HTML syntax, and of course we are going to be covering this H1, so this is heading 1, so there are different types of headings, and these are just pre-styles for the output text, and as you can see, once I type that here, shows up here on the right hand side. You can also save here on CodePen, and this gives you the ability to access at a later point. Just keep in mind if you're using the free version that this is publicly accessible. So basically, these are the resources that we're going to be using, so CodePen and Brackets.io, and we're going to be creating out, and also Chrome as our browser, and these are the only tools that we need in order to show you and demonstrate how you too can start writing out your own HTML code. So in the next lesson, we're going to dive right in and start looking at creating HTML code and creating our first HTML template. So far, we've been working on a fairly boring web page. We added in hyperlinks, which added in something to our website, but coming into this website, there's just a lot of text. And web visitors, they want to be entertained, they want to be engaged, they want to get something that captures their attention. And you see this all over the place. Any website, there's always uses of images and mixed in with the text. Text is formatted on different sizes and so on. And this lesson, I want to show you how you can add in images into your website. So let's go ahead and add in an image. So maybe first of all, we want to add in, for cats, we want to add in a picture of maybe some animals or something like that. So let's create a brand new line here, and the tag to add in images is img. So typically what you might be expecting with opening and closing tags is that maybe you'd have a img and then you'd put the image there and then you'd close it, but really that doesn't make a lot of sense because the image would typically or should be represented as an attribute, just like it is within the hyperlinks, because with an image it's just like the line breaks that we saw earlier, that this is a self-closing tag. We don't need any other content, we just need to know where that image is located. So let's set up a source for that image and equal out the source. So just like what we did with the hyperlinks, we need to specify where this image is located. So if that image is located within our root folder, it might be something like cat.jpg, but for this lesson, I don't have any content, actually images, set up and ready to go. So where am I going to turn to? I'm going to turn to the internet. Just as I did with the blind text generator, there's actually a solution for dummy images. And luckily for us, we've got one for cats. So I can go ahead and I can get a color image of a cat. I can get something like this, and I can get a path to that cat. So all we're doing over here is I'm going to copy out that path to the cat, going over to here, and instead of the source being cat.jpg, let's open up and create, just make sure that I'm specifying it properly, so cats, and go back into my code here, save that, and let's go back out to our web page and refresh it, and there we go. So we've got some cats there. And we can also add in some other animals as well. So I'm not sure if I'm going to get dogs, but maybe for the next paragraph, so instead of cats, I want to add in some dogs. We don't have dogs, but we can do animals. So maybe, luckily, we might get some dogs. Same thing for birds. Let's do something like that as well and do some animals there. So now let's go out, refresh our page, and see what happens. So luckily for us, we ended up with a dog there. We ended up with a dog under the birds, but that's okay because we never know what we're expecting when we're getting this automatically generated content, placeholder content within our website. So there we go, cats, dogs, and so on. So another thing with images is that a lot of times if somebody is coming in here and maybe the image doesn't load, or if they're using a screen reader, they're not going to be able to tell what's contained within this image. So good practice, best practice with images, always add in those alt tags. So alt tags is basically a way that you can specify to screen readers, or in case your image doesn't load, some additional information about what the user or what is intended to be within this space. So this could be pic of cat, and this one would be dog pic, and these are just the alt tags, and again specifying bird maybe. So I'm not sure what's actually coming up here, but maybe we get a bird there. So now when I refresh it, I've got a cat, I've got a giraffe, and I've got a way to specify if that image doesn't show up. So let's just mix up this path here, refresh it. So now the second image isn't going to show up, but we get something that says dog pic, and this is what's coming from the alt tags, as well as if you're coming in with a screen reader, it'll instead of just trying to show you an image, it'll actually read out what the contents of that image is meant to be. So in the next lesson, we're going to look at additional ways that we can break apart some of this content. So maybe we want to set up a table, and we want to have a bunch of information output for the web user. And I'm going to show you how to set up a table in the upcoming lessons that's coming up. In one of the previous lessons, we looked at unordered lists and ordered lists, and we saw how we can list out some content. Well, what happens if you've got multiple columns of content, multiple rows, and you want to list this content out nice and neatly for your web visitors? And in order to do this, we have tables. So similar to the list items, we've got an opening and closing table. So opening and closing table tags, and now we need to add in some content within the table. And a table is actually going to have more than just that one dimension. So in list items, we had a bunch of items here. We listed them all out, but we also need to consider that we've got rows and columns. So there's going to be two dimensions here. So we need to build this out within our web page. And for tables, so we specify that for each row, we specify the breakdown. So we're going to have a multiple number of rows, so we can just open and close those row tags. And so now we've got all of our rows set up here, and now we need to add in that content. So for tables, we can do TD. So I believe that's table data. So we've got one, close off that TD, and if we had more than one column, so we'd have two, and we'd have maybe three over here, and so on. So now you can see that we're already starting to build out some structure for our tables. So for table headings, there's actually additional, so instead of TD, we're using TH, so that this way the browser understands that these are table headings. So if this was, if we were collecting a bunch of people's names, so first name, close off that table head, next heading in our table, and you see it gets bolded automatically there. So if we had last name, close off that table head, And let's say we're collecting a bunch of phone numbers. So we've got our opening and closing table head. We've got essentially our columns get listed out and so on. So everything is getting output and represented. And now instead of that, we had John. We'll just do a John Smith there, and we'll make up some kind of phone number here. So non-existent phone number. Copy that over, so we've copied that format. And the next person in our list might be someone named Mike. Just give him a name, Mike Jones, and then he's got a slightly different phone number, and so on. So this way we can start representing and outputting our content in a more meaningful fashion to our web visitors. So you're probably looking at this and saying, okay, well, it looks pretty good, but the table is kind of a little bit crammed here. The first name, last name, it's crammed together with the phone number, and it's not really evident that even though it looks kind of like a table, it doesn't really look exactly as what we would want our table to look like. And this is where we add in attributes. So we add in additional styling into our tables, and also any other attributes we can add in order to make our web pages look a lot better, or HTML content look a lot better. So with adding in styling into our web pages, we can do it inline, where we add in the style attribute here. So I'm going to just specify that this is 100% and give it property of width. So you see that right away it changes the look and feel of our content. We can also add in styling in a CSS file as well, or we could add it in style tags up at the top of the page. So a number of different ways to add in styling within the web pages. So this is a way to add it in as an attribute. So in the next lesson, I'm going to show you how you can add styling and update the look and feel of your HTML elements. So that's coming up in the next lesson. The last lesson we looked at how we can build a table, and we introduced how we can add some styling. So actually customizing the way that HTML content is output within the web page. So not all tables have to look the same way when we add in attributes. And this is the exciting part of web design, because this allows you to use attributes in order to add your own spin, look and feel to the content of your output in your web page. So we saw that we can add in a width of 100%. We can also do things, so we can chain these styles together by the semicolon here, and I can do something like a border, so one pick border. I'm going to make that border solid black. So this is all within that same property. And we see that right away we get this border around there, so it makes a little bit more sense there. We can tell that this is the contents of that table. We can also add in styling, and the cool thing about attributes is you can add them to any one of your elements. So if I wanted to add it up here, I can add that same styling within the row here, and we don't actually, so when I save this, just wanted to illustrate what this is going to look like. So we actually don't see any change there, and that's because the row itself, you can't set a width of 100% on the row, doesn't make sense. And border of one pick solid black, again, the row is this whole thing over here, so it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to do it 100%. So you'd have to cut that back and only apply styling that actually really makes sense. And typically for something like this, you would be applying that styling on the actual active cell. So we see here that the first name gets that, we see that the last name gets it, and so on. And now we see that we're able to add in individual styling for those individual elements. We can update that and change the look and feel. But the downside of what we're doing is that we're adding a whole ton of code in here. And really bad practice to add those style attributes, even though it's good to try out styling and try out all these different values here and make some updates, like you want maybe thicker borders. You can really easily play around with this and make some updates to it and see how they turn out and how they look and so on. So you can see that there are a bunch of updates we can do here. Do something like so solid. So there's a lot of different options. But the downside is that we've got to repeat this, paste it over and over again if we're applying it for each and every single element, which is just it's very time consuming, very confusing, and if you want to make an update, you've got a lot of code and a lot of attributes to update. So if I want to update these table headers, I don't like black, I want to get blue, it's going to be really difficult because I've got to go through every single one. And this is why having styling for the page, on-page styling, as well as CSS is super helpful within this case. So let's jump back into our web page and let's look at how we can style every one of these elements here. So let's go up into the top of the page and we're going to create a brand new tag called style. So open and close that style tag. So this is CSS, Cascading Style Sheets, and essentially this gives us the ability to patch into any one of our elements or a whole group of elements and actually make some changes to those elements. And with styling, we've got a number of ways to select these elements from our web page. So we see that we've got just a whole bunch of content here, and we saw previously how we can add them as style attributes to every single one of these elements, but not really efficient. So let's look at our heading 2, and let's make a selection of all of our heading 2s. So H2, curly bracket, and now all we need to do is specify the properties that we want to place, that we want H2 to hold, and how we want it to look like. So we saw that we used border before, so let's use that one again. So one pick, solid, red, save that, go back out to our web page, refresh it, and now we see that all of our H2s now have the same property. So basically what we've done is we've taken our HTML code, we've found a way to pick out the different elements, then have them represented and be able to apply something to those. So you're probably looking at this and saying, okay, well, what if some of these H2s, I don't want to have this border, I don't want to have this color, I don't want to have these properties too. And this is where styling gives us a few other additional options. So one of the things that we saw earlier is that we can ID different elements. And with IDs, we can't have multiple elements with the same ID, not a good idea. But with IDs, we're really able to specify that for birds, maybe I want some kind of specific background color for just this one particular element within the web page. So let's select out birds, same way as we did our hyperlink, so the hash there, the name of, or the ID of the element, and now we're selected birds. Let's do a background color, so we can do background color, and let's pick a color for the background. Save that, go back out to the page, refresh it, and there we go. So this one, we were able to pick it out from all the other elements using the ID and apply some styling to it. And this way, we could have just as easily gone over here and done style as an attribute and added the background color. So this would work the same way, but best practice usually is to keep all of your styling in one area within your HTML code so that you can have it more readable whenever you need to make updates and so on. So much better way of representing and updating your styling of your page. So we saw how we can select out different elements. We can even do something where we can do the list items and really easily update those. Go back up here, we see all of our list items now have that red border and so on. So all we need to do is select the tag name and we can apply styling to it and select it out from our content. So one of the problems that you're probably thinking of, well, you know, you can select out these tags, we can select out one individual element within our page, but what happens if I've got some paragraphs where I want to add in some content, some styling to, and maybe I've got an H2 here, I want to apply that same styling. So how do I select those? I want to have it happen multiple times within the web page. Maybe I want to highlight it or something like that, and I can't find it, I can't pick it out between the tags and between the IDs. And there's one other way to select and add in representation for the elements, and those are classes. So we add in another attribute and we do class, so maybe we'll do something like highlight. So always try to keep your names meaningful. So if I want to highlight that and I want to highlight my dogs here, and then just within here I want to highlight some content as well. So I'll show you how to do that as well. But for now, let's just highlight several different tags. And with highlight, so we do for classes, it's a dot in order to represent those classes. And we're going to do the same one here as we did background color. And this time let's do background color yellow. Let's go back out, refresh it, and we can see that we can highlight anything with the attribute, the class of highlight, and it highlights. But what if we want to highlight maybe a few words, but we don't want to change the way our output of our HTML is being represented? So we want to just inline something, highlight a few words here or there, and we don't want to highlight the whole element. We don't want to create a paragraph to wrap around it and so on. So there is a solution for that within HTML. I'm going to show you how to do that in the upcoming lesson.